In Germany, during the 20th century, it was finally added to the much older classical ballet new dance forms. Not only the technique changed, but it was also the goal and place of the dance, its meaning for the dancer, and its importance against the other art forms which originally dominated it. Today, we are gonna talk about these dance forms, which evolved and finally ended in what we now know as the modern dance. It began with the Ausdruckstanz, or expression dance. Rodolphe Laban is the most famous member of this movement. He played an important role in the organization of three dance congresses in Germany. In 1927 in Magdeburg, in 1928 in Essen, and in 1930 in Munich. In the Ausdruckstanz, the focus was not made on the virtuosity, but rather on the true expression of the inner self. Technically, this meant for Laban that he was focusing on the precision of the movement, that begins with an intention and then circulates in the different parts of the body organically. He wanted to renew academic dance and created the scenography for that purpose, a new notation process to allow the writing of dance. That's where his and Mary Wigman's opinions diverged. She had been one of his students for many years, and after the end of the First World War, she had created her own school and company in Dresden. But during the Congress of Magdeburg in 1927, she clearly showed she had more revolutionary ideas for the modern dance. That means she wanted to revolutionize the theater through modern dance. She didn't want the dance to be subject to the theater anymore, and she wanted to break with the classical dance's inheritance. The German modern dance was so divided in two artistic currents: absolute dance and dance for the theater. Another famous student of Laban, Kurt Jooss, was like him favorable to a compromise between modern expression dance and the classical ballet in the theater. He created the notion of dance drama, which he intended to reunite both currents of modern dance. In the dance drama, the work of art was created both thanks to choreographic and dramatic impulsions. So both the choreography and the drama depend on one another. He was also the creator of the dance section in the Folkwang Hochschule, an art school in Essen, where Pina Bausch studied in the 1950s and then performed and choreographed in the 1960s. Now, I must introduce Pina Bausch to you. She is a choreographer who has created what we call the Tanztheater, dance theater in English, and of the dance drama. She studied in the Folkwang Hochschule in Essen from 1955 to 1959, and then in New York for 2 years in the Juilliard School. She was therefore a student of Kurt Jooss, and later his soloist in the Folkwang Ballet. The Tanztheater that she created is still nowadays the name given to the companies of modern dance, as it was the case for the first company she directed when she left the Folkwang Ballet in 1973. It is a current in the dance that focuses on the importance and significance of the movement. She invented what is now called the Pina method. On a randomly chosen music, or sometimes even without any music, she asked the dancers of her company to improvise, using their life or their imagination as an inspiration, and not knowing what the theme of the show will be. Then she selects and puts together the movements that she wants to use. She's working with intuition, and it's only then that the music is brought into play. So, the music is added to the movement, while the movement is completely independent from the music. The relationship between dance and music is then no more hierarchical, but instead rather a partnership. It's on the way they are combined or confronted that depends in which way the spectator will be moved. Sometimes she even creates contrasts thanks to the opposition between the meaning of the music and the meaning of the movement. In Kontakt Hof from 1978, while the music is very light, about love and tenderness, the couple on the stage mutually inflict one another small wounds and humiliations. The caresses turn into violent movements, for example, or meeting the other turns into destroying the other. This way, Pina Bausch underlines the mechanisms of humiliation and oppression and the power relationships between the sexes. Pina Bausch's choreographies mean something. She often uses the contrast between the music and the dance to this end, like Brecht did. Also, modern dance became very multicultural during the whole 20th century, since it got a lot exported in all countries around the world. If we take the example of France, Kurt Jooss and Mary Wigman performed there with their companies in the 1930s, with some critical success. Then students of theirs or their co-workers played an active role in spreading German modern dance there by performing, teaching and or associating with Parisian theatres, such as Jean Weitz and two members of his company, François and Dominique Dupuis, or the companions of dance, Jacqueline Robinson, Karine Wegener, and Jérôme Andrews. And even though it was the American modern dance that dominated in France in the 1950s with Martha Graham or Mercy Cunningham, it's also noticeable that the two modern dances were beginning to influence one another. Jérôme Andrews, for example, studied both in the US and with Mary Wigman, and also in Mary Wigman's school in the US. Later, it's, as I said, Pina Bausch who studied both in the Folkwang Hochschule in Essen and in the Juilliard School in New York, and she also performed a lot in France, at first invited by Jacques Lang to the Festival of University Theatre in Nancy in 1977. In Germany then, the modern dance made the movement a lot more expressive, which is interesting since the German language is also very expressive about the movement. That's probably why it was in Austria that the Eurythmy was invented, an expressive art movement created by Rudolf Steiner and Marie von Sievers, which is often used nowadays in the world of schools and which notably allows to conceptualize ideas or even names with shapes drawn by the movement.